Hey guys, I'm here today to do the promised positive reviews. I read all three of these books in the month of June. They're all new releases. I adored all three of them. I don't see how they won't be on my favourite books of the year video, to be honest. Just fantastic. I couldn't even begin to say which one I liked more, so this is going to be in a random order because I genuinely cannot distinguish between the three. I think they're so amazing. And I was trying to think back to when I last had such a strong reading month, that not only did I read some 5-star books, but like such fantastic 5-star books, and I genuinely don't know how long ago that was, so it's been such a great month and I cannot wait to talk to you guys about these fantastic, beautiful books. So the books are The Museum of You by Caris Bray, which came out on the 16th of June, so you can get a hold of this one now. The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry, which came out at the end of May, I believe, so again you can get this one now as well. And The Tidal Zone by Sarah Moss, which comes out on the 7th of July. I was kindly sent this one by Granta Books for review, so yeah, you can get a hold of this one very, very soon, so you haven't got long to wait. So firstly, I'm going to talk about The Museum of You by Caris Bray. Now, I hadn't previously read her other two books, which is A Song for Issy Bradley and her short story collection Sweet Home, although I am currently reading Sweet Home and really enjoying it. So this book is just beautiful. Do you know what? Honestly, I wouldn't have picked this book up. I'd heard people talk about it and I thought, I don't really know if that's for me. It sounded like a bit like easy reads. I don't really know if that's the sort of thing I want to read. And I was probably being a bit snobby about it. I don't know what misconception I had about Caris Bray, but evidently I was completely wrong and I will hold my hands up and admit that. So I saw this book in a sort of second-hand bookshop in brand new condition for relatively cheap, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a go, I'm going to see what I think. I absolutely loved this book. I will read it again and again. It's the sort of book that when you're feeling rubbish, you want to read a book like this because it's just fantastic. So this book follows a young girl who's 12 years old called Clover Quinn and her dad Darren. They live up in the north of the UK together and her mother isn't around, and it's the first summer her father is leaving her to spend her summer holidays alone and not go be babysitted by the elderly next door neighbour. So her dad's a bus driver, so he works 5 days a week and she's looking after herself, and she's sort of pottering around going to the local allotment or going to visit her granddad or her uncle and making friends round and about. So this story really focuses on the fact that just before she breaks up from school, Clover goes on a school trip to a local museum and she meets a curator there who tells Clover about her job, and Clover gets really enthralled by this idea and decides that as their spare room contains all of her mum's old things, she's going to use this as a way to make a museum of her mother, a museum of you. And she's going to do this in order to sort of make this big recognition to her mother and hopefully make her dad happy, but also to be able to get to know her mother because her mother's not been around since she was very young and her dad doesn't really talk about her. So this is a very quiet book. There isn't loads and loads of plot. The chapters alternate. It's told in third person and we get a chapter with Clover and a chapter with her dad, and in between these chapters we get to read the little museum cards that Clover writes about some of the items she's putting in the museum with her mother, which are really cute and beautifully written. And as well as the characters of Clover and her dad, we also focus on the elderly next door neighbour who's just really funny, and Clover's granddad, who's just, again, hilarious. Clover also makes a local friend from a girl who's recently come to the school from another country in Europe and is sort of getting a bit picked on by the other children. Her uncle also has problems with sort of mental health issues, and so he's involved in the story. And it's just this wonderful mediation on life and people and warmth and family and the different types of family you can have and build yourself, and I just adored it. Not much happens, it's definitely just a character study, but it's so heartwarming. And as well, something that really heightened this book for me, that made me love it so much more than I would have done otherwise, even though I would still have loved it without this, is that this book is really firmly in its time and its place, and Caris Bray wasn't scared to do that. A lot of authors will avoid talking about things that will date a book, so they won't reference a local supermarket, because it's going to ostracise non-UK readers, it's going to ostracise people who read this book in 40 years and maybe don't have the nostalgia factor with some of these things. But for somebody who lives in that place and who lives in that time, it makes it so much more wonderful because you feel so much more there and present in the story, and it feels so much more yours. I don't often laugh at books, I've told you guys this before. This book made me smile and laugh and chuckle so many times. My boyfriend doesn't read, I've also told you that before, but I read a few bits of this out to him and even he thought they were great and really chuckled. There's especially a comment about Jeremy Kyle, which is I guess in America you guys have the equivalent of like Jerry Springer. Jeremy Kyle, I guess, is attempting to be more serious than that, but it's just completely horrendous. And there's references to local supermarkets and lots of references to Lotus biscuits. I love Lotus biscuits. They're sort of caramelised biscuits, and there has been a spread made of this biscuit, so you can, you know, spread it on toast, and I hadn't tried it. When I finished this book I had to immediately go out and get some of this spread because I was like, I don't know what I'm missing out on, this sounds amazing, and let me tell you, it is amazing. So I'm very, very glad that the author convinced me to pick that up. So this book is just heartwarming. I don't know how else to sell it to you because it's just a fantastic book. It deals with so many different themes. All these characters have so many different things going on, and there's quite a few characters that are being juggled with, but none of them feel washed over. None of these themes feel poorly handled. It all feels like it has the right amount of depth and roundness, and none of it feels unnecessary. Every single aspect of it is right for being there and perfectly handled, and I just loved it, and I will 100% reread this book, and definitely going to pick up her other novel now because I just thought this was so amazing, so I hope more people will read it as well. Now the next one I'm going to talk about is the Tidal Zone. The reason I'm going to talk about that after the museum review is because they are completely different books in the way they're written, but they deal with some similar themes. So this book again is set in present day, and this book deals with a father from first person, so it's from his point of view, and he is a stay-at-home dad. His wife is a doctor and he has raised their two daughters, so one of them's 8 and one of them's 15, and he's the one who's looking after them. So we already have these sort of similarities between the dad being the sole carer, between the dad having really deep connections with his daughters, being really focused on family. Both these books are really set in their time, so this book again references things, maybe not as much as the other novel, but it still definitely references things that are very current in our world, and it also deals with, you know, a similar upsetting topic. So in Museum Review we have the fact that, you know, Clover is really obsessed with getting to know this mother she doesn't have, and in this novel the book opens with the 15-year-old daughter Miriam having a sort of episode when she's at school on the field and she stops breathing, and luckily one of the teachers spots her and manages to keep her heart going and get the paramedics there before, well, she does medically die, but they manage to bring her back round. And so the book is focusing on how a family comes back from that. How do you live with the fact that your daughter effectively died for no apparent reason and nobody knows if it will happen again? How do you live with ever letting them out of your sight? And this is something I could really personally connect to because quite a few years ago when I was at university, I was on the phone to my mum, just chatting as you do, and I could hear a bit of a ruckus going on in the background, and me and my mum both figured it's my brothers having a sort of a play fight. There's quite a few years between them, so they always sort of have a mess about. And then she realised that my little brother was downstairs and the noise was coming from upstairs, so she obviously sort of panicked a bit. And when she got up there, my elder brother was having quite a violent seizure, and there was, you know, he'd sort of cut his face and there was quite a lot of blood everywhere. Anyway, he had to be obviously taken away in an ambulance, and he was later diagnosed with epilepsy. And he had quite a few seizures in quick succession, and we don't know the reason for his epilepsy. It was randomly, you know, came up. He was already in his mid-20s, no real reason for it, and my mum afterwards was terrified. You know, the amount of phone calls I got at university with my mum in tears because she was terrified to let him sleep alone in a room. She never wanted him to go out drinking again with his friends, and she just lived with this sense of terror for months afterwards. And, you know, it's been a few years now, he's been on medication for years. It should never happen again, it hasn't since, and she sort of, you know, can live with it now, but at the time, I think for her, it was her world. It consumed everything because, you know, you're in this constant fear, well, what if I walk out of a room and I go back and they're not, you know, they're not still alive. So it is this terror, and I could really relate to that. I think even if you haven't had that experience with someone you know or love, you can relate to that. And this is a book, I would say, I don't usually give trigger warnings, but I will say that this book really intensely focuses on the idea of losing somebody or losing yourself. It really focuses on the ways in which your body can betray you. And if you have really bad anxiety about dying, if you have really bad anxiety about being ill, you know, if you tend to be worried a lot about the things your body might do and feel the need to go to the doctors a lot and things like that, then I don't think this will be a good book for you to read. I mean, maybe it would help you to accept some of those things, but I feel like it would make you panic a bit more. You know, it makes you aware of all the ways in which your body can sort of fail you for no reason. So in that sense, possibly, if you do feel that way, then maybe this book isn't for you, but it was so perfect. So this book again is quite slow, not much plot. You're literally focusing on the fact that Miriam is being kept in this hospital because they don't know what's wrong with her and how the family are dealing with that. But as well as that, you know, this book really talks about the NHS, so the fact that the mother's a doctor and she does ridiculously long hours and isn't often at home, and the fact that, you know, the people in the NHS are looking after Miriam. And then it deals with the fact that Adam is this modern stay-at-home dad and all the comments that him and his wife get because of that and the things they have to deal with. I loved Adam. I do not often read books about male characters, but he was fantastic. The way he got annoyed about things that in, you know, the usual way a woman would get annoyed about, you know, like his wife leaving a mug on the side with all the drink left in it because she hadn't bothered to wash it up or put it in the dishwasher, and the fact that he does all the laundry and all these little snarky things that felt so bizarre coming from a male perspective that I just loved. Adam's a great character. His daughters are brilliant. Miriam is amazing. She's such a sort of stand up for herself teenager, complete feminist. She knows exactly what she wants out of life. She's not going to be fucked over by the system. So this book is such a mix of, you know, family and grief and the fear of losing somebody, but also, you know, looking at the medical system, looking at how the gender stereotypes, looking at sort of philosophy, and also Adam, the stay-at-home dad, is an academic, so he sort of does part-time work at a local university, but he is trying to write a book on Coventry Cathedral and the way it was built and the history behind it. And so throughout the book we have chapters talking about how Coventry Cathedral was built and how it came to be, and it's just a really beautiful thing that whilst you get the story of this life that's really so small and could be lost at any moment, we're talking about this structure that's sat there for hundreds of years and is so solid. And yeah, it's just a perfect mix. And this is one of those books that you read and within 2 pages you know that this writer has such talent and such ability because the writing style is perfect. And this is the sort of thing that if I could write, I'd want to be able to write like this. It is amazing, and I'm definitely going to read all of her other books. I've read her memoir about living in Iceland, but I haven't read any of her other 4 novels. Definitely going to read them now because this was amazing. So lastly we have the Essex Serpent. This is so beautiful. So this is set in 1893, so it's a historical novel, obviously, and it's just absolutely amazingly fantastic. It combines so many themes that I love, you know. My thing with books isn't necessarily the plot, it's the themes, the writing style and the character development, and this is something that this book has in spades. All of those things are perfect, just so many things drawn together that I absolutely freaking adored. Oh my god, I love this book so much. This book is about a woman called Cora Seaborn. Her rather horrible husband, who was incredibly controlling and violent, has just passed away, and she has decided with her sort of maidservant, who's effectively her best friend, and her young son, who it's never outrightly said but you feel that he probably has a form of autism, they decide to move to Colchester. She hears some things locally from friends that there has been a serpent spotted in the Essex waters, and she decides that she wants to go there and, you know, be around when all this is happening and look into it. She's very interested in fossils, she's definitely a scientist, she's definitely an academic, she loves all these sort of things, and finally with her husband dead she can sort of break out and just do what she wants. She's very wealthy and she really doesn't give a shit about social norms and what's expected of her, and in fact she quite likes to disrupt the social norms. She quite likes to do things that make people a bit worried and think, oh, that's not what should be happening with a woman. She likes to challenge people in the way they think about women in this time period. So Cora Seaborn is a completely fantastic character, absolutely adored her, definitely one of the best female characters I've ever read about, loved her. So, as well as having this really strong female character who has all these elements that I love, you know, she's studying natural history, which is something that I adore, it's a historical novel, which is something else that I adore, her and her best friend are feminists and really politically aware, which is something else that I loved. But as well as all that, we have these wonderful mythical aspects. This book is so steeped in myth. So this is set in Essex. Essex is part of East Anglia. I grew up in Suffolk and now live in Norfolk, which are both also part of East Anglia. The landscape in all 3 of those areas is fairly similar, you know. People within these areas are going to argue and say this one's better, this one's better. But if you've never been to any of the 3, I'm sure to you they'd all look pretty similar, to be honest. They're all flat, they all have lots of fenland, and they all have lots of coast. Pretty much that's it. They're all beautiful, I adore them. So, This is set in possibly not a place I've been. This village isn't somewhere I've visited, but it's a landscape I'm incredibly familiar with, and you know, I could smell it when she described it, and I could see it, and I could just picture all these places I'd been. So after visiting Colchester, Cora realises that, you know, she wants to be more in with the action, and some of her friends tell her that they know a local vicar in one of the local villages, and that she should go and visit him and talk to him about it, because his village have been talking about lots of stories to do with this mysterious serpent, and that she should go and visit and stay in a house that's available to rent there, and, you know, be right in the midst of the action essentially. So William Ransom is the local vicar. He has a wife called Stella, and he has several children, and this book has lots of characters, okay? And I realised this at the end. I realised that this book has quite a few characters, but not once was I confused, not once was I unsure about who was being spoken about. You know, Cora has a friend who is a surgeon, and he has a friend who's also a surgeon, and they're quite central characters. And then we obviously have the vicar and his wife and their children, and then we have some of their children's friends and some of the villagers. But it never gets confusing. All these people are handled really well. Yeah, like I say, you never forget anything, and all these people really add something to the novel and are integral to the plot. So really, as well as this book being about all the aforementioned things, it's a story of fear and scaremongering and the myths people can create themselves, and whether something is any less real if it isn't what you first imagined it to be. So I don't want to spoil anything about the actual myth, because that's the point in, you know, that's the crux of the book. But I will say that Sarah Perry managed to keep the question and the mystery of this creature a mystery and a question throughout. The novel, the tension, the mystery was taut. The whole way through I was desperate to know, I was desperate to know more, and it felt magical. I feel like sometimes these sort of books can either cop out and leave you with a question at the end, or they can reveal the answer and then you feel like, oh, is that it? This book didn't do either of those things. I don't want to give away what it did do, but it was just, I just can't even express how fantastically handled all these different themes were. And this book is written beautifully. I have a couple of bits I just had to turn the pages down on because I just adored them. On her 19th birthday, she exchanged birdsong for feathered fans, crickets in the long grass for a jacket dotted with beetles' wings. She was bound by whalebone, pierced with ivory, pinned by the hair with tortoiseshell. So I just love the fact that Cora adores nature, but we're told of the way all these natural things have suppressed and contained her because of her husband. So I loved that excerpt. And then another one I completely adored is more towards the end. It doesn't give anything away, so don't worry. You drew in a breath and all the seasons were in it. Spring greenness in the grass, and somewhere a dog rose blooming. The secretive scent of fungus clinging to the oak, and underneath it all something sharper, waiting in a promise of winter. Oh, how can you do that? How can you epitomise all seasons in one sentence so beautifully? So I adore this book. The only other thing I want to say is that I completely loved the relationship and friendship between Cora and William. I thought it was perfect. I loved it. There's so many things I haven't touched on in this book because there's so many themes, you know, the way Stella's illness is dealt with, the way colours are described, it's just everything about this. I could run on and on and on because so many amazing things about this book. So yeah, just a fantastic, fantastic read. So I've tried to say what I can say in this short amount of time about these 3 fantastic books. I could talk about all of them so much more. I could run on and on, but I won't. I hope you will go and read them. Do let me know if you already have or if you're now going to, because I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!